Hi there, my name is Jeremy Horn, and I just did a capstone assignment over the spring term, and mine was based on gun reform in the United States, and my project was based a question on if there is a solution to gun reform in the United States. And I'll go over it with the next few slides on what I was able to research. Um, First of all, we want to back up to the Bill of Rights, in particular the Second Amendment. Was a ratified document on December 15th, 1791. Uh, the first 10 amendments are the Bill of Rights. The Second Amendment, it set the precedent on the right to bear arms, where it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And that's kind of key when we go over the solutions our government has proposed in the 20th century and the current century. Um, as I was saying, with the 20th century gun reform, 19th century didn't really see much in terms of gun reform acts. It was up until 1934. President Roosevelt signed a deal called the National Firearms Act. It was a New Deal initiative. I don't know if you guys have heard the New Deal with President Roosevelt backing us up out of the Depression. But this NFA, National Firearms Act, was an initiative to curb gangland crimes that was occurring in the United States at the time, and it involves businesses and transportation of firearms. One of the Supreme Court cases that set precedent was 5 years later, the United States versus Miller. Um, that determined Congress can regulate the selling of firearms and the short barrel shotguns. When I fast forward to the 60s, we had the murders of JFK and Martin Luther King and Kennedy's brother, Robert Kennedy. In 1968, there was the Gun Control Act, or Title II of the National Firearms Act. President Lyndon Johnson's Act permits United States citizens to purchase guns when they're 21, and only it prohibits felons and mentally ill persons from buying guns in the long run. 1986, there was the Firearms Owners Protection Act signed by Ronald Reagan. 1993, the Brady Handgun Violence Protection Act, and along with the year after, the Violence Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act were each signed by Bill Clinton, and we'll go more into detail with what is happening in today's instances. In 2008, there was a precedent on the 1939 Supreme Court case called District of Columbia versus Heller. This is focusing on the individual gun rights and not the whole, in which the court decided that handguns were banned in Washington, D.C., and it violated the Second Amendment. So this was kind of a big court case that just happened recently, and as we go through the next few slides, they kind of sets precedent to where we're basically at today as far as if there was a solution. The biggest example that I can come up with was the Parkland High School March of Our Lives rally that took place last year. It occurred, believe it or not, a month after the mass shooting that took place at Parkland High School in South Florida. It garnered popularity really quickly to the point where $3.5 million were donated a week literally after the shooting took place, and it was primarily supposed to be used for lobbyist politicians, and I'll get into that in the next couple slides here as to what the money was supposed to be used for. As possible solutions to gun reform, many attempts by Congress. Every time there was like a mass known shooting, like Columbine, for example, Sandy Hook, it seems like many attempts were had by Congress to try to ban the weapons that were used in those mass shootings, the assault weapons bans, for example. Um, what was found, though, regardless of that, as far as the United States, there's more deaths with handguns as opposed to assault weapons, and it's becoming a problem across the country. So, with that being said, since there's been attempts, Congress just been kind of undecided on how to handle the surge of mass shootings, regardless of what type of weapon that is used. So there's been kind of a stalemate in Congress as of today, pretty much. Um, Again, after the mass shooting in Parkland High School, there's been rallies. I believe it's March 24th of last year, 2018. Mass protests started in Washington, D.C. with the March for Our Lives, and across other cities across the United States had the Never Again movements. Um, the biggest goal in mind, and as I said, the only reason why money was to be raised was pretty much catch politicians off guard, especially the ones that are heavily influenced by the NRA, National Rifle Association, um, to kind of like sway them into, kind of see their side as to, why students don't feel safe in schools. Um, that's pretty much the biggest reason for this type of activism. And as we see here, uh, not only was there anti-gun um, movements such as the March for Our Lives and the Never Again, what coincided with them was pro-gun reforms and protests. For example, the Tree of Life synagogue shooting. There was a massive pro-gun rally outside the city hall in Pittsburgh. There were basically arguing that the city is not doing enough as far as they're trying to ban uh, weapons like AR-15s and whatnot, and the pro-gun reforms basically they're saying, hey, that is breaking Pennsylvania constitutional law. You can't do that. So that's part of the reason why the right, for example, they've dismissed this problem that we have with mass shootings, kind of going on with that, even at churches and schools. Um, the activists, they claim that they're too young to understand their protests. That's mainly the Parkland activism that took place. That was the reason why they felt that they kind of dismissed this problem. Uh, Benefits of basically speaking up. Pretty much, there's a support for stricter gun laws. And as I was saying, there's just basically this show of support, especially after events such as Columbine, Sandy Hook, Parkland, you name it. It just seems like there's an immediate uptick. There was a Gallup poll um, put together after Parkland, and there was a 7% jump of support for stricter gun laws as the benefit. And then months later, after these activists and rallies kind of waned down, the support kind of went back to where it was, and that's kind of a problem as to where we're at right now. And let's go back here. Last thing that Congress is trying to do right now is that there is a recent U.S. House bill that was passed called the Bipartisan Background Checks Act. It's still waiting in Senate, but it's basically it's trying to limit gun sales, especially at gun shows and gun shops, to people that have, number one, IDs that are 21. So the background checks that they're trying to pass is very, very strict. And right now, as of today, June of 2019, there's kind of a stalemate in the Senate as to whether or not to pass that act that was unanimously passed by the U.S. House on pretty much by both sides of the ledger. So anyway, as far as the solution to the problem, just to kind of answer the question, there really isn't a answer to the problem per se. It's more, you know, when there's a surge on these types of violent acts, there is a source, a show of concern, but in the long term, it kind of wanes back when things kind of relax. So it just seems as though there really isn't a solution to the problem unless Congress acts upon it. And as of right now, they really haven't acted upon certain solutions to the problem. So I really couldn't find anything in my research as to um, whether or not there was a, a solution to the problem of gun violence. And hopefully it does become addressed in the next several years. And let's just hope that another act doesn't happen to get an actual solution. Hopefully, a solution happens before it gets even worse than it already is. So, that's basically my project in a nutshell on on gun reform. Thank you.